Stewart, now, the book, Blue Blood, True Blood, Conflict and Creation. Get us started on that subject.
Well, after all my years of experience and research and being out there in the world, it became quite apparent that most of history and pretty much a lot of science and medical information is all incorrect. Mm-hmm. Basically, purposely falsified for public consumption so that certain imposition of laws and economies and politics can be imposed based on that false history and false science. And I thought, well, somebody needs to put as much as they can together in one place so you can look and get the general history of the planet the way it's supposed to be told. And Blue Blood, True Blood was a result of many years of research and travel to many, many different locations, continents, to get the true and accurate information, as well as you mentioned earlier, when I was in those 13 years of Montauk and subsequent times working in government agencies, mm-hmm. I learned a lot about what's really going on out there that they never tell the public, and which, if anyone did tell the public, of course, they'd be ridiculed as a fool or a conspiracy theorist or what have you. Mm-hmm. And so that's what Blue Blood was about, to give a true semblance of history. Now, of course, it can't have every single thing in there because it would be thousands of pages long and it would be impossible to go through. So I tried to condense it to as readable and as understandable as possible for people to get the true information about why they are the way they are now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, when we speak of blue bloods, and I think it's quite ironic when we speak of blue bloods in the general sense or in the general terms that we've known it over the years in this country, we speak of blue bloods being referred to as royalty, when in reality blue bloods, amphibians have blue blood. What is the connection between the two?
Well, the term really refers to the type of blood of a particular genetics. Those who have reptilian genetics or reptilian-like genetics have a much higher copper content in their blood. And so when copper oxidizes, it turns a bluish-green color. And that is why they were called blue bloods in the past, because that is how their blood oxidized. And they kept that term because it distinguished them from the so-called masses of humanity, whom they considered to be more animalistic. Mm-hmm. From a reptilian mindset or perspective, mammals or mammalian life forms are inferior because they always have to adapt to environment and because they must always differentiate sexually, whereas most reptilian species in the universe are androgynous and very rarely evolve. They pretty much stay the same eternally.
Folks, you're listening to the Investigator's Report. I'm Gary Purefoy with my very, very special guest, Mr. Stewart Swerdlow. We're discussing the history of the blue blood and the blue blood line. Now, we went into detail in our first conversation with you, Stewart, when we talked about the history of our galaxy, the involvement of various extraterrestrial races in connection to what happened here on Earth from creation on. Since we've covered that, well, what we'd like to do is to go from the early stages of the aliens themselves and how the infusion of those races played a part in developing, again, like I said, the royal family, and then what we know today to be the Illuminati.
Right. Do you want me to go back to the time of Lemuria or bring it forward more towards modern history?
More towards modern history.
All right. Well, the blue bloods today, or the Illuminati families, mm-hmm. can trace their ancestors back to the Sumerians. Okay. In that area of the world where we're now having the problem with Iraq and Iran in that area there. Mm-hmm. And they basically were not only the Sumerians, they transformed into the Mesopotamians Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Khazars spread into Europe and broke into these 13 Illuminati families who blended with the remnants of the Atlantean refugees who were there from the time of the destruction of Atlantis, and who also had mixed with the descendants of the Magdalene lineage, which came from ancient Israel or Palestine during the time of Christ. And the people need to remember that the south of France is or was a very large ancient Hebrew kingdom, which was the descendants of Mary Magdalene and her children, who were the children of Christ or Emmanuel, and they became the Merovingians and blended with the Khazars, who came into Europe from the east, from the Caucasus Mountains, and blended. Now the Khazars used the symbol of the dragon, and the Merovingians or Magdalenian used the symbol of the pure lion. And when they merged, they created the new symbol, which we see now all throughout Europe, which is that reptilianized lion. It looks like a lion with dragon claws and a very vicious dragon-like face, yet it's a lion-like body. That's where that symbol developed. And we're seeing then, from that point, the breakup of this group into 13 families who control various sections of Europe, and then the rest of the world, and still do to this very day. Now, these 13 families have a leader, which they call the Pindar, which translates, means the penis of the dragon. There's a heavy phallic worship,
right.
in reptilian religion.
Correct.
And the Pindar, for the last almost 800 years now, has been the Rothschild family, or the head of the Rothschilds. But even amongst the Illuminati, they get tired of each other. They do fight amongst each other, even though they have a common goal, which is the domination of Earth. And so we find that the Windsor family has, in the last decade or so, tried to break away from this Illuminati group and become the Pindar themselves. And that's when the EU started to form and break away from the rest of what's going on in the world. And now we're having the formation of North American Union. It's like each one of them who wants to be the Pindar is creating their own empire within the context of a New World Order. And then, to make things more complicated, we're seeing now the Romanov family, who up until the last decade had been quite quiet about their involvement with anything. Now they're trying to create their own version and become the Pindar, which is why we now see Russia acting so brazenly and independent again, and basically reconstituting the Soviet Union as it was before, only without communism, but more like a dictatorship of a socialistic kind.
Right. Now, just to kind of take you a little bit back, because you mentioned Mary Magdalene, and you mentioned Christ Emmanuel.
Right. Basically, this person named Emmanuel was genetically created by an alien group at the time that was seeking to change the direction in which mankind was headed, not because it had good intentions, but because at the time, as I write in Blue Blood, there was so much alien interference on the world at that time, after the destruction of Lemuria and Atlantis, and Sumeria was kind of spreading out in other directions. It was a free-for-all. And this particular alien group wanted to divert and create and control through religion and manipulation. It was a joint effort at the time of what has become known as Pleiadians, reptilians, and the little grays, which really all work for one another and still do. There's a lot about those Pleiadians, which is all New Age falsehood. They're not what people think they are.
Right.
So anyway, they genetically created him and implanted him in the womb, hence the Immaculate Conception. It really wasn't an Immaculate Conception, it was an implantation in the womb. See?
Right. Tell us about the royal family. Take us through Charles, Queen Elizabeth, Diana, and now what we know to be left of that lineage to be the future is Harry and I think William. Tell us about that family.
Well, that's a very big story, but I'll try to bottom line.
We've got 16 minutes left, so hope we can pull it off.
I'll give you a couple thousand years of history in a few minutes.
Okay.
Basically, all the royal families of Europe, whether it's the Windsors or the Queen Beatrice in Holland or whomever it may be, they're all related. They're all cousins of one another at this point. They've all intermarried over the centuries because they keep that blue blood lineage intact. And because they intermarry so closely like this, there comes a time when the percentage of reptilian genetics in the body becomes skewed.
Mm-hmm.
And let me explain. When you are a hybrid with a 50-50 split of mammalian and reptilian genetics, there is a problem as far as how the body will manifest when you're half and half, literally.
Mm-hmm.
So the body genetics will always defer to the mind pattern of the soul personality in that body. So if you have a reptilian mind pattern, the reptilian genetics will activate and you will have a reptilian form. If you have a human or mammalian mind pattern, the human body will take hold. But of course, if the reptilian takes hold and you're the Queen of England, it's a bit of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not going to be out in your regalia with your scales and your three horns sticking out of your crown.
Right.
So they need to maintain a human form in public. And the way to maintain that is through ritual that involves the ingestion of mammalian or human harmonics like hormones, blood, organs, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically they ingest through ceremony those materials in sexual and sacrificial ritual. Now, over the centuries, the inbreeding in the Rothschilds and the Windsors became so that there was more percentage of reptilian than human. Enter Princess Diana in the Spencer family. The reason that marriage took place had nothing to do with love. It had to do with the fact that she came from a committee of 300 family that closely support the Illuminati, and her genetics were more of a mammalian side than reptilian. So by infusing her genetics into the Windsor family, it skewered back the royal family percentage to 50-50 again, preventing any problems in the next generation or so. And then when she was done with that, she had to be sacrificed. And that's a whole nother.
That's a whole other story with the accident.
So
and everything.
that's why she was married to him, and that is why she produced those two heirs to the throne, so that they could maintain their 50-50 split in the genetics.
And it's well documented, however, like you said, the marriage had nothing to do with love, because he was always involved with Camilla in the midst of it.
Well, hello, he's involved with men. And that's another story. When I was in Switzerland years ago, someone who knows the royal family, and I can't name names because I was sworn to secrecy, said if you look at Camilla's birth certificate, it's not Camilla, it's Camilo. And it is actually male.
Wow. Now, someone said there has also been said, and these are just little dispersions, but you want to take it under advisement and under consideration that she or he has been described as looking like a crocodile.
Well, she looks like a man to me.
Well, yeah, that too. But the features in general have been made. That comparison has been made as far as looking like a crocodile. I mean, from a reptilian standpoint.
Yes. Well, the royal family basically, if you look at them, they really do look reptilian. Especially if you look at the Queen Mum before she passed on. She was quite rough.
Right, and we discussed that in our previous program. So now with William and Harry, what role or what type of what positioning or where do they fit in terms of the future, the New World Order, the stage second coming? I mean, what are they just surrogates, or will they play a significant role in the New World Order?
Well, of course, that does depend on which Illuminati family takes control as Pindar. And of course, the Windsors have every intention of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I must say something at this point, because with the entrance of the Romanovs into this battle for Pindar,
Mm-hmm.
that created actually a unification, if you will, of the Windsors and the Rothschilds again. Because each one realized that they as individual families could not win against the vast resources of the Romanovs now.
Right.
So even though they're not as wealthy as the Rothschilds or the Windsors, have much more land, people, and resources on their side. So that is why, Russia has connected to Iran and other places that are against the West for this very reason. So we're seeing now the Windsors and the Rothschilds actually coming back together, not because they like each other, but because they have a common enemy now within the Illuminati.
Right.
And that's why we're seeing now in the newspapers saying that once North American Union is formed, that it has and will have an economic and political connection to the EU. So we're going to see this gigantic formation of a unified EU and NAU at some point.
One, the fact that this whole regime, this whole government, this whole Bush apparatus was really not only fueled and put into place by the cheaters and manipulators in the voting fraud issue, but also his re-election. Do you know almost 90% of the Christian community supported him?
Right.
And then to continue to support what he does. The guy lies atrociously. And I hate to go that far on this program, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it, I'm going to be done. He lies atrociously, and they believe it. They believe it, Stewart.
That's because he's playing into the fundamentalist Christian notion of the Book of Revelation and supporting Israel and the Second Coming and the Holy Empire. It's all playing into that.
But yet people will not see the harm or see the reality. It's an illusion, what we're looking at. But they don't see the reality of what it means.
I think, and it's my hope, that the immediate plans of the Illuminati will backfire on them. Because even though people are programmed and brainwashed and submissive, eventually when you poke somebody long enough, they're going to push you back.
As a result of the shock that was displayed on us from 9/11, it was really the kind of event that really began to open up. It was an awakening, so to speak, and we've had Leah LaChapelle on this program discussing that. That event was an awakening for many people to see the light. And I think you're correct, Stewart. I know. You are correct. Should we go into Iran and should we have another conflict by means of preemptive war, eyes are going to continue to be opened up. Eyes are being opened up now. We've talked on this program, folks, about the Illuminati, the blue blood history. We've talked about the whole Christian and biblical apparatus and the reality of where the whole notion of Christ Emmanuel came from, the reality that there was no resurrection. So one would either get angry or one would say, well, then where's our hope? And we talked about that in my previous program with Janice, and we can touch on that again as we come down the stretch. We do have a hope. It's us.
That's correct.
We're the darn threats. They're really afraid of us. And Stuart, I'm going to let you bring it home with that thought in terms of what we do have available to us.
And that's exactly correct, because what they cannot eliminate is the God mind within. And God mind has no religion. It is neutral. It allows all things, and it gives you free will to decide what you wish. And no one and no thing can ever disconnect that from you. They can make you think that you're disconnected from it, but you never can be. And that's why I have my work, my language of hyperspace, my deprogramming, my oversoul work. I teach people how to become aware again of the God mind within. And when you bring that energy forward, you can overcome anything that is in your path or that holds you back.